So as we've discussed, there are 6 sources of influence that shape our choices, that determine how we're going to behave. The first of those we call personal motivation. Now this is the most problematic often for leaders, because if people seem to lack motivation, the question is, can you give it to them? Well, the answer is no, but you can help them find it. A psychologist by the name of Bill Miller from the University of New Mexico developed a really powerful, fascinating process that we're going to practice that helps people find their own motivation. And you as a leader can use this to facilitate that discovery. But rather than make this intellectual, let's make it concrete. Let's describe the problem we're up against. I was asked once to work with a leader, let's call him Rick. His CEO said this was one of his most brilliant financial minds. In fact, he was recognized in his entire industry as one of the best financial strategic thinkers there was. But he had a terminal problem. The problem was that he was abusive to people. The CEO knew that this guy, Rick, aspired to be the CEO one day, but he said there is no way the board will ever allow him to rise in this organization. So he asked if I could coach him. I said, I don't know. Well, let me just give it a shot. So I shadowed him for a little while, watched him in a very first meeting. This was a financial strategy meeting where a group was presenting findings about how to restructure the finances of the entire company. They'd been working on this proposal for 6 months and now would pitch it to Rick. They began their presentation. Within minutes into the presentation, Rick started shaking his head. He started drumming his fingers on the table, and finally he walked over and slammed their laptop shut. And he said, "Is this the best you can come up with?" He said, "This is infantile. Do you not even want to win?" And then he began barking orders to them about how they need to change their entire proposal. They walked out with their tails between their legs, and he and I were left alone in the room. I asked him, is that kind of how it goes? And he said, yes. And I said, what was the problem there? He said, they're morons. Well, I said, I think I can help. So here's the problem. We've got somebody who in that moment is emotionally abusive, explosive, who's experiencing emotions that help him feel justified, motivated, who help him feel actually pleasure at causing other people pain. How would you help somebody like that to change? I talked for a little while with Rick, and I asked him on a scale of 1 to 10, how important is it to you to change this? He said, about a 6. I said, really? Really, a 6? I said, that's higher than I thought it would be. I said, why is it not a 1? I'm going to pause for a moment because what I just did there is crucial to the development of motivation in other people. But before I elaborate on it, I want to set up a second situation. A woman by the name of Charmin, who was struggling with weight loss. She'd been struggling for about 20 years. She was about 150 pounds overweight. When I talked to her about her greatest struggle, she said the biggest challenge presented itself in Mexican restaurants. She said, my biggest temptation is chimichangas. I said, really? She said, oh yeah. She said, I'll get into a restaurant, I'll pick up the menu, and if I see the word chimichanga on the menu, I involuntarily start salivating. It's a compulsion with me. I have to have one in that moment. I said, great. I think we can work on this. I asked her the question on a scale of 1 to 10. How important is it for you to change this? She said, a 9. I said, really? A 9? I said, why is it not a 1? Now, the first step of helping people find motivation is to refuse to do what you and I typically do, which is get behind the pulpit. You and I become the preachers. We become the evangelizers. We try to tell people why they should change. The preacher people trust most is their self. You need to help them deliver their own sermon. Your job is to facilitate that out of them. So the first question you ask is not, why aren't you changing? The first question is, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you want to change? Even if it's a 2 or a 3, that means there's a little bit of desire to change. Now to the research. So Bill Miller, this world-renowned psychologist, was working with people who had overdosed on drugs or alcohol in emergency rooms. Now, these were people who had often been in emergency rooms multiple times. And most of their relatives had been delivering sermons to them about why you should change and all the reasons you're destroying your life and the people that you're hurting. And they'd heard every argument in the world and yet never changed. They attempted one little intervention in emergency rooms that had a substantial impact on people changing for months and years after this 15-minute intervention. What did they do? After helping people get through whatever physical trauma they had experienced as a consequence of their overdose or their alcoholic inebriation, they paused and interviewed them. Just an ER nurse would ask the question. So boy, this is the 4th time you've been in here. On a scale of 1 to 10, how important would it be for you to overcome alcoholism or drug addiction? If the number was anywhere above 1, the conversation continued with, wow, a 4. I would have thought it might be a 1. Why is it a 4? Now I'm going to lay out the rest of the steps in what we call a motivational interview. But the primary principle here is you can't motivate anyone. The reasons for change are already in them. Your job is to help facilitate that out. Not shame, not guilt, not sermons, but trusting that inherent in them is some motivation to change, and then using a structured process to help them elaborate, enunciate, and commit to their own reasons. Okay, so you've got somebody who's got some level of motivation to change. How do you help them anchor that in? How do you help them turn that into an action plan for change that will enhance their motivation on an ongoing basis? So I'm talking to Rick. He's just finished this meeting. He's just blasted these other people. So I took him to the second step. I said, it sounds like this is something that you have somewhat of a desire to change. He said, yeah, I do. It's stalling my career. Didn't feel any remorse about the people he was damaging, but at least there was some self-serving desire to deal with this. So I said, here's what I want you to do. For the next week, I want you to carry a 3x5 card with you. Every time you feel good about abusing human beings, he recoiled a little bit at that. Every time you feel good about abusing other people, I want you to pause and ask yourself, what sentence am I using in my mind to help me feel good about that? See, here's the deal. Good people can't do bad things unless they're wiring it up in their brain in a way that helps them feel okay about it. Somebody who has some desire to overcome an alcohol addiction can't take another drink without doing something in their mind first to help them feel good about taking that drink. Somebody who wants to lose 150 pounds can't eat a chimichanga without doing something in their mind that helps them feel pleasurable rather than painful about a choice to sell out their long-term goals. So your next step in conducting what we call a motivational interview is to help people identify these crucial moments and the mental barriers to change that they're going to have to surmount in order to succeed. So I asked Rick to carry his 3x5 card. Every time you get in one of these moments, write down the sentences in your mind and bring those back, and we'll talk about them in a week. He came back a week later. He had a 3x5 card with just a couple of statements on it. The first of them happened the week before when we were in this room where he slammed the laptop shut. I said, what sentence happened in your mind? He said the first sentence was, they're idiots. The second that recurred in his experiences during the subsequent days was, if I don't threaten you, you won't move. Now, can you see how those would work? If rather than seeing you as a human being, I have you in my mind as an idiot, I can behave towards you in ways that actually feel good. There are appropriate ways to treat an idiot. So I can feel personally motivated, satisfied, pleasure at behaving that way. But can you see also how helpful it is for you as a leader, for you as a coach, to help people recognize that, to see what's happening in their mind that's affecting their motivations as a decent human being to behave in ways that aren't getting them what they want? The second sentence, if I don't threaten you, you won't move. Can you see how that would cause somebody to feel like I've got to light a fire under you? So I slam a laptop shut. I berate people. I start barking orders at them. The challenge here is now, having identified that, how do you affirm, help, and facilitate another person in overcoming those? So I played a little game with him. I said, all right, Rick, I'm going to read one of these sentences to you. I want you to take you back. I want you to go back to one of those crucial moments where you were about to behave in ways that you know are not getting you where you want to go. And I want you to articulate now why it's an egregious, horrific lie. So I'm going to take the pro argument. You're going to take the con. I said, so go back to that meeting that I first saw you in. And I'm going to make the argument to you. These are a bunch of idiots. If you don't threaten them, they won't move. Rick's eyes got big. He'd been on the debate team in college, so he sort of knew this game. How do you take a counterpoint and argue against it? But it got very real and very emotional to him. His eyes got big, And he said, this one's easy for me to argue against. He said, in that meeting, that was the most unfair, that was the most horrific thing I could possibly do. He said that kid that was given the presentation, it's about a 26-year-old young man, just graduated from the MBA school. He'd been pulling all-nighters for about 6 months to get ready for this presentation. No one wanted to win more than he did. He didn't need threats. He needed support. He said, in fact, he'd been working 16 hours a day for the previous 2 weeks and missed his brother's wedding to get ready for that presentation. He said, I felt so ashamed walking out of that meeting. I said, great, that's perfect. Now, what I want you to do is articulate sentences that are true. How could you embrace truth in that moment that will help you to connect to what's most important to you, to the goals that you want to achieve? He made a new card. The first sentence on the card said, these are people, not tools. The second said, I want to be a teacher, not a tyrant. These were his words. These weren't a sermon coming from me. These were his words coming from his soul and his heart. The third said, at the end of my career, I'm not going to care how much money I made. I'm going to care how many lives I've touched. This was Rick, the tyrant, the one everybody was terrified of. But the truth in his soul was so pure and connected so easily to the kind of long-term goals he had. So he carried the card. And I said this, Rick, over the next week, all I want you to do is before you go into a meeting where you think you're going to be in a crucial moment, a moment of temptation, where you might behave in ways that you ought not to achieve your goals, all I want you to do is pause, take a breath, and read the card. And just let it sit in your mind. And then continue. 1 week. 1 week later, he came back. And I said, how's it going? And he said, I feel like a different man. I began hearing stories from others who said what's happened to him. This modest little intervention, just as in the emergency room, of helping somebody articulate how much they want to change, help them identify their own crucial moments and the thinking patterns that keep them from feeling motivated to change in those moments, and then develop their own refutation, their own response to that. Committing that to a card profoundly shifted his experience. Let's go to my friend Charmin, the woman who's trying to drop 150 pounds. I said, tell me how you've succeeded. This is now 2 years later. She's gotten to her ideal weight. She's maintained it. But not only has she maintained it, she says she feels motivated to maintain it. It's not a struggle. She's not fighting against motivation. Motivation is helping her. She showed me her card. Her card had just a few little sentences on it. The sentences said things like, I want to like the way I look in the mirror. I want to take care of my body in a way that'll make me proud before my God. She says, I'd like my husband to be proud of the way I look. I want to have energy for my grandchildren. How did she use the card? Every time she'd sit in a restaurant, if she saw the word chimichanga leaping out to her from the page, she'd take the card out and she'd pause, she'd take a breath, and she'd read a sentence, and she'd think about it. She said chimichanga lust would so often turn to an absolute abhorrence for that choice within literally a matter of seconds. People can profoundly change the way they feel about almost any choice. You aren't destined to feel personally motivated to make bad choices that are not leading to the goals that you want. Inherent in all of us is a desire to change. Our job as leaders is to help facilitate conversations where people can discover those reasons to change and then commit it to writing and use those in the crucial moments where they need them most to keep them on track to what they want most. So you should have in your team edition materials a copy of a worksheet for how to conduct a motivational interview. I just want to walk you briefly through that, and you'll see the basic structure that I've described in these two examples. So first, you're asking people to clarify their long-term goals. This is the equivalent of saying on a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you want to change? The corollary question after getting that response is, and why? Why would it be important to you to change this? Now, it's important that people commit this to writing. This isn't just a mental exercise. There's something about the kinetics of writing down your ideas and thoughts that helps us to commit to them more fully. Second, consider the ways your behavior could keep you from accomplishing long-term goals. So in addition to what you want them to think about what they don't want. if they continue on their current trajectory, what are some of the things they will give up? What will they surrender? The two reasons to change, obviously, are to avoid and to obtain. And these two first steps help them to identify both of those reasons to change. Third, what are some of the reasons you're ready to make a change right now? Is this a moment where you could make that kind of commitment? Fourth, think about what you currently tell yourself during crucial moments that keeps you from wanting to change then. You see, here's the problem. We all have hot modes and cold modes. Psychologists have identified that occasionally we're in hot modes, moments of temptation, where we're using different reasoning centers in the mind. What this process helps you do is during those hot moments, it helps you to recognize that you're in that moment and pull yourself out of it, get to a more thoughtful and more deliberative state. So think of what you're saying to yourself in those moments that's helping bad things feel good. Fifth, determine what you're going to say to contradict, to refute, to change how you feel in those crucial moments. Now, once again, this is an important interview process. You can occasionally do this by yourself, but it's very helpful to have a trusted coach, a leader, a mentor, walk you through this process and help you commit some of those insights to writing. And sixth, distill that into a personal motivation statement, something you can use to take a breath, to read and reconnect yourself to longer-term, more important values, and change how you feel during those crucial moments. Okay, so let's say you've completed your motivational interview, you've developed a personal motivation statement, you've been carrying it around for a week, and it's starting to lose its effectiveness. Often this happens because we discover a new reason, a new barrier that needs to be incorporated into this. So let me go back to my friend Charmin, who's struggling to get off her chimichanga fetish. And she starts to notice as she goes through the week that one of the things that didn't come up in her motivational interview with you is that she has a different reason in her mind. Perhaps it's that I've done really well for 3 days and I want a reason to celebrate. So I'm going to do this to celebrate. I want to take care of myself. I want to reward myself. That's a new sentence that she now has to deal with a refutation for and add to the motivational, to the personal motivation statement. So notice over time, if you start recognizing new issues that need to be addressed in your personal motivation statement. Second, how do you use this as a leader? This is a powerful tool for leaders, whether you use it in a structured process like this or whether it's more intuitive and more off the cuff. Because so often we're working with direct reports who perhaps are having a deja vu performance review. You talked to them about it last year and the year before and the year before, and they just aren't making the change. And this could affect their future. Helping them find reasons to address those concerns, helping them develop their own reasons is a really important aspect of leadership. So keep in the back of your mind, your job is not to motivate them. Your job is to help them find their own reasons. The whole purpose of the motivational interview is to get the right person behind the pulpit, and that's the person that needs to be hearing the sermon themselves. Your job is to just trust that their innate goodness and desires will help elicit enough of a reason to change and then help them structure that into a plan that helps them commit to making the improvements they really want.